Doggone it, EW. Why did you delete your comment? That was the best laugh I had all day. But I'll respect your privacy and tell you a story that to pay you back for making me laugh, which is my brother gave me a knife. This knife is called a cold steel knife, and it comes what they call factory sharp, which it was more like razor blade sharp. So um, it's a one hand knife. They figured out a way around switchblades where they put a thing on the back of the knife, and you can open a knife with one hand. And this is a large knife. So I don't know. I'm bored or whatever, and I'm flicking it open, and I found a way that I could flick it open by smacking it against my leg. But you had to have the order right. You had to have the order right, and you had to hit the little knob on the end to get it started, and then flip it open. It's like some kind of trick you play with a lighter or something like that. Well, my dumbass got the order wrong, and I opened the knife and then hit my leg with a razor sharp knife. Now, the first thing that happens is I'm like, uh oh, I fucked up. And it wasn't extremely painful. Also, not a good sign. Like when a cat scratches you, it's irritating and it's painful, but it's a superficial cut. That was a very deep cut. So, sheets of blood just began running down my leg, and I'm wearing a pair of shorts, and I lift up there's a cut in the shorts, which offered no protection whatsoever. And I lift up, and I look, and a flap of skin just falls down. And Bernie Mac used to say something about, man, I'll smack you in the head till I hit the white meat. Well, I'm looking at white meat, and blood's just running out of me. So I'm like, okay, I get a bunch of paper towels, and I put these paper towels, but it just won't stop bleeding. And I put more paper towels on it, and it just stops bleeding. And I'm like, it just won't stop bleeding. And then I like have a waste can beside me, and I'm throwing I go through a whole roll of paper towels, and then I'm like, well, shit, I got to do something about this. And I'm holding, I forget what I was holding on it, but I'm holding something on it with one hand, and I'm dialing the phone with the other, and I'm like, hey, uh, Wiz, that's my brother-in-law's nickname. I'm like, you got a cigarette? And he goes, what happened? He could hear it in my voice right away that I'd done fucked up. And I was like, well, I cut my leg, and yeah, it's bleeding a lot, and I just really want a cigarette. So he drives down there and he gives me a cigarette. But as soon as he comes in the door, I like say, yeah, I did this, and I remove my hand, and that flap of skin comes down, and he's looking at the white meat, and he's like, oh, he can't handle it, So I put pressure back on it. It's bleeding some more, and I'm smoking my cigarette, and he's like, "What are you gonna do about it?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to really. I'm just trying to get it to stop bleeding. It won't stop bleeding." And I was like, "Man, thanks for the cigarette." And then he left. He like looked. It looked like a slaughter scene. I mean, there was like blood everywhere, and so uh, I'm like, "Okay, I got to figure something out with this." So I get a towel, and I take a towel, and I get some duct tape, and I just put a towel like a dish towel, and wrap this duct tape up, and I got the bleeding stopped. I'm like, good, okay, the bleeding is stopped. I don't know how much blood I lost. It seems like a lot, but I feel okay. I'm in my 20s. I'm young, healthy, and crazy as shit. And I'm like, I shouldn't be alone. Hmm. Well, my dad would probably come over, and I could sit over there and just not even really talk about it, and we could watch the football game. And then, if I do need stitches or somebody to take me to the hospital, they will go ahead and do that, because this is in my 20s and I had a very rough time in my teens with hospitals. And so I call him up and I'm like, oh, yeah, the Buckeyes on? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, can I come over and watch it? And he goes like, sure. And my dad, no stranger to knives or knife wounds, um, happens to can't help but notice that there is blood on my pants and a towel wrapped around my leg with duct tape. And he's like, what'd you do? And I'm like, I cut my leg. And his upbringing, he's like, oh, well, get in the car. No more questions on that. So I grabbed some newspapers because we had these things called newspapers. They were back in the day. And I was like, well, this is to make sure I don't get any blood in this car. So I'm sitting on newspapers. I got a bad knife wound in my leg. And I go to his house. And I'm sitting at his house. And I don't realize this. But I put newspapers down, where I'm sitting. I don't realize that all that moving around and walking around and stuff, my little makeshift blood stopping bandage, it had shifted. So I'm starting to get a little sleepy. I'm getting a little sleepy. And I look down at the newspaper and there's like a pool of blood. I'm like sitting in a pool of blood. And I actually stuck my finger in the blood and it went into about right there. I'm like, take me to the hospital. He goes, what? He took a look and he's like, yeah, you need stitches. Yeah, take me to the hospital. So we get in the car, and I put more newspapers down. And at this point, there's just blood all over me. There's just blood all over both. It actually went from one pant leg to the other pant leg. I don't know how much blood I lost, but I was sleepy. Not a good sign. So we're in the car, and the red lights come on behind us, and the siren. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is not a good time to get stopped by the police. And I need to get to the emergency room to make sure I don't bleed to death. So, they come up to the passenger side of the car, and my dad's there. And the cop is like, well, sir, we're stopping you because your car fits the description that was given. There was a bad incident in this bar where somebody was hurt very seriously, and that a car matching the description of your car left the scene. I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to make us get out of the car and I'm going to be cut and bleeding. And this cop is going to think that I am part of some bar fight that never happened. I had a fight with myself and lost. I had a fight with intelligent, sane, sensible, common sense behavior and lost. That's all that happened. But I'm thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to bleed to death because uh, my the car that I'm in just happens to match a description given off of a violent incident in the very bad town of Canton, Ohio. As I have said, Canton, Ohio, the Hall of Fame city, was also the Hall of Fame city for violence. So this was not that freaky of a story, except for the coincidence of being stopped on the way to the emergency room with a knife wound when they're talking about a violent crime and they don't specify, they just said it was bad. So I'm like, please don't make me get out of the car. Please don't make me get out of the car. And my dad, talked his way out of it somehow. I don't remember how, because I was just like praying to myself, please, please, don't kill me through like a cop throwing this. I don't want I don't want to die because a cop is like questioning me. Because I'm like, I need to go to the emergency room at this point. I'm looking paler than usual, and I don't know how much blood I lost, but I'm kind of in and out. I was like, this can't be happening. And I was like, this can't be happening. And so they didn't make me get out of the car. They didn't even look inside the car with a flashlight and see that I'm sitting in a pool of blood and covered with blood. Because at this point it's dark outside. And so I go to the emergency room. Now, I used to think that like the quickest way to get into the emergency room and to get medical attention was to complain about your heart. It is a much quicker way to get into an emergency room and get treatment if you are actually covered in your own blood. Just, if that ever becomes relevant to you in any way. If you really need to get in the emergency room, just bleed all over yourself. It really works. So I come walking in there, and I don't even make it like to the desk to even announce who I am. They just come rushing out of there. There's a whole bunch of people sitting there. I can still remember one guy holding his eye, where he had got some metal in his eye or something, and just like looking at me. And there was just, I don't remember what hospital, not important, but they come running out there, and they just literally like throw me into a wheelchair, and the guy immediately starts cutting off my pants with them funky scissors that are angled. And he's like halfway cutting off my pants. And he says, "You don't mind if I'm cut off your pants, do you?" And I'm like, "Well, they're kind of already being cut, so no." So he does this like in a like they wheel me back only a little bit, but like the whole like waiting room is watching this because they're looking at me, and I'm already pale before I start losing tons of blood. So, they do this. Yeah, these people got treated to some nice theater. So, a guy cuts off my pant leg, and he looks and he starts laughing. And I'm like, "What are you laughing about?" And he goes, "Well, who the hell did that with that duct tape and that towel?" And I goes, "That was me." He was like, "Hey, Roger, man, come look at this." And they thought it was hilarious that it's like it's like speaking of hillbillies, duct tape can fix anything. So they thought that was hilarious, and but then something else, and then the conversation switched, and the questioning switched. I said, they started asking me questions about like, how did you do this? How did this happen? And they kept making me repeat, like I'm telling them, like I'm fucking around with a really sharp knife, and I screwed up and I cut myself. And they keep asking me it in different ways, but the answer is always, I screwed up with a knife, I was screwing around by myself, and I cut myself. I'm starting to realize this is a cop show. Okay, they're interrogating me because they want to know if the cops should be called in, and is this is part of a violent crime. And maybe I'll see the same cop that stopped the car that matched the description. And maybe, he'll have some more interesting questions. But I'm like, look, okay, I cut myself with a knife. I did not get into a knife fight with a midget. You know, like, how am I going to get cut in the leg? You go to cut somebody in a fight. Unfortunately, I know these things because of my father. You don't go for the leg, okay? Contrary to the movie Hannibal, where he cut the guy's femoral artery. That wasn't a knife fight. That's not how a knife fight works. So, I'm like, I literally said that. Look, I did not get in a knife fight with a midget. I cut my own leg. Can we stop with the questions? And uh, I heard Roger snickering in the background. He couldn't help it. And they were like, okay, okay. So they take me back, and they're like, "You're real pale. How much blood do you think you lost?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And they're putting the plasma in me, and they're wondering if I need a blood transfusion, and they're asking me my blood type and shit. And I was like, "I don't know." And I was like, they're like, "That's a bad cut," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's pretty bad." And they were like, they told me to do the same thing I was doing. They were like, "Just hold this, put pressure on this." And then they wrapped it up professionally for the moment. And so, anyways, so when they go to put the IV in, the lady forgets to cap the IV because they need an IV in you to not just to put the plasma in, but in case you need, you know, drugs of some kind put in it. But when they're doing that, the lady forgets to cap the IV. Blood starts shooting out of the IV all over the place. The guy that was the intern that was on duty, that was the doctor, he comes in there and he's like, For God's sakes, Marjorie, don't you think he's lost enough blood already? Cap that damn thing. I just start laughing because at this point it's all funny to me. And there's blood like coming out, coming out of me here and coming out of me there. And I'm like, this is some crazy shit going on here. And so they get that straightened around, and she gets it situated right. And so uh, they start in, and it's all numb. It's gone numb at this point because when you injure yourself badly enough, your brain does a disconnect, and shit goes numb. That's how you know you're hurt bad. And uh, they they're like, well, we got to stitch you up. Um, so I'm going to shoot you up with some pain stuff. And I'm like, don't bother. And he thought I was being macho or something like that. I'm like, I can't really feel it anyway. And he goes, he just ignored me. I was like, just go ahead and start stitching. And he just ignored me. And uh, so he just shoots me up anyway, numbs up the area, and they stitch me up. And I don't remember how many stitches. I'm looking at the scar right now, but it's kind of high up on my thigh, and I don't have legs like the Rockettes, so I'm not going to show you. I'm looking at it right now. It's about that big. And anyways, it wouldn't show up on camera anyway. So that was my fucking mistake. As I said, stitch me up without any pain medication. It I can't feel it anyway. So they tell me, um, I'm like, can I get any pain medication? Because when these nerves wake up, this is really gonna hurt. And they're like, oh, you'll be okay. Just take some Tylenol. So this was apparently post crackdown on opiates, and people hurting themselves to get um, pain meds or whatever. So like, Tylenol don't even work for a headache for me, man. I just freaking just about died. And I'm thinking, fucking great. I don't even get to like have a buzz. I don't even get no pain pills, and this is gonna hurt like a bitch the next day. So sure enough, it did hurt like a bitch, and I could wear jeans back then. So I didn't have any food in the house, and my dad, uh, I either called him or he called me, and I was like, man, I don't have no food. Can I go to the grocery store? And this is the next day, and I was told, like, just take it easy, don't move around, and let yourself recoup. But doctors, doctors and their bullshit. So I'm walking around the grocery store, and I didn't tear the stitches, but I put like, I think I did kind of tear the stitches because I kind of had to doctor it when I got home. But a big blood stain starts forming on my pant leg, and I'm like, well, that's enough food. I think I'll just go home now. I can survive on this for a couple of days. I don't want to freak anybody out, but I had like, you know, blood stain like that on my leg, and I was like, yeah, it's time to go home. So I went home and I put some antibiotic on it, and I had some band-aids, and um, you know, so the rest of the stitches held. I didn't tear, and so that's my story. But I don't know why. I forgot the guy's initials now, but I don't know why you deleted your post. It made me laugh. So I told you a funny slash morbid slash ironic story to pay you back for making me laugh. I appreciate that. But that's all there is to that. And I will talk to you tomorrow. It is about 11:30 at night here in the Heartland in Maslin, and in the morning.